Good afternoon, senior dignitaries and my dear friends. I, Darshwatsa, welcome you to the 2021 edition of the Energy and Resources Institute's annual flagship event, the World Sustainable Development Summit, being held virtually under the broad theme of redefining a common future, safe and secure environment for all, from 10th to 12th February 2021. This edition of the WSDS marks 20 years on the platform, and it is a matter of great pride for all of us at TERI that all of you, speakers and delegates, have been able to join us for this important milestone edition. Your support is instrumental in the success of the platform and our efforts. It is indeed a great honor for me to set the context of the youth thematic track titled Youth Unite for a Safe and Secure Environment for All by presenting my viewpoint as a representative of the youth of India. In the past decade, we have seen repercussions of environmental degradation caused by several instances of reckless development. We have seen natural disasters like tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, floods, drought, heat waves, and winter storms that cost us more than $1 billion in damage. There have been instances of remedial action, and it is encouraging to take note that India is emerging as a strong nation in addressing climate mitigation by initiating global alliances that seek to work towards a cleaner and greener environment. While the threat of climate change grows bigger, youth of the nation is also hopping onto action and bringing forward the change that we as future leaders should create. Additionally, I would also like to share a few quick examples of how we, the youth, can lead this change. Act local by bringing awareness amongst the people and enlighten all about the benefits of renewable energy and public transport. Understand climate change and oppose skepticism. Adopt sustainability as a way of life. Innovate and create an eco-conscious economy and a demand for green jobs. Be the change makers by promoting eco-conscious behavior at both individual and institutional scale, and participate enthusiastically and form collaboration channels between the government, the youth, and the institutions. I believe the day we are able to achieve all of this, we'll be able to establish a nation which is way much more aware about the catastrophe that is coming for us, and is also aware about the fact that if we want and if we are determined to, we can collectively prevent it. With this, as a representative of the youth of India, I would also be glad to deliver a small message to the esteemed guests from our side. We would be really happy if we are included in our nation's fight against climate change, in our national dialogues on climate change mitigation, and in the making of such policies which possess the ability to leave an impact on the environment, and if we can be given a platform through where we can directly let our ideas and grievances be heard by our authorities. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to welcome Ambassador Ajay Malhotra, a distinguished fellow and senior advisor for climate change at TERI. Ambassador Malhotra joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1977 and worked at the Ministry of External Affairs, New Delhi, and Indian missions in Bucharest, Geneva, Kuwait, Moscow, Nairobi, New York, and Washington, D.C. He retired as Ambassador of India to the Russian Federation after 37 years of distinguished service. He is also currently the Vice Chairman and member of the Advisory Committee of the United Nations Human Rights Council, Geneva, Chairman and Managing Trustee of Chikitsa, an NGO providing free primary healthcare, Chairman and Managing Trustee of Shiksha, an NGO providing free education to underprivileged children, Chairman of the Nehru Trust for Indian Collections at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and Chairman of NAB India Center for Blind Women and Disability Studies. He also served as an independent director of ONGC and ONGC Videsh from 2015 to 2019. So, welcome to the Youth Thematic Track, and we request you to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Darsh. Dear participants, a warm welcome from me to TERI's flagship event, the World Sustainable Development Summit 2021, particularly to the youth attending this opening day thematic track. A year ago, the world was girding up to better tackle the serious challenges of global heating, climate disruption, and biodiversity loss when it was blindsided by the COVID-19 pandemic. It exposed public health delivery weaknesses in many countries and drew attention to the interdependencies between environmental, economic, and social crises and outcomes. It also compelled us to assemble today for our 20th World Sustainable Development Summit in a virtual format. An early bounce back from the multiple overlapping crises confronting our planet is crucial. This global recovery from COVID-19 must lead us to a more sustainable, a more inclusive, and a more resilient future, one that enhances climate action, strengthens biodiversity protection, addresses air, land, and water pollution, desertification and deforestation, respects human rights, and puts our world back on track to achieve by 2030 the unanimously endorsed Sustainable Development Goals. The new international mantra swirling around is to build back better or build forward better from the pandemic. And there has been notable rallying around a move towards net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Tackling climate concerns will require concerted government action, as well as conscious and informed efforts by individuals and more effective partnerships between governments, the private sector, and civil society, including youth. Our response has to be inclusive and allow for meaningful contribution by all stakeholders. Young people whose futures are threatened by accelerating global warming are using their skills and talents and increasingly demanding greater action towards a more just, equitable, and climate resilient society. Indeed, youth voices and contributions, when effectively empowered and harnessed, constitute a powerful force for positive climate action. The work undertaken with and by youth would also be crucial to raise ambition of governments. Recognizing this key role that youth must play in tackling climate concern on meeting SDGs and post-COVID recovery, the World Sustainable Development Summit has provided a dedicated public platform for young people to be involved and to express their views on issues that affect and matter deeply to them, and it supports them in doing so. Indeed, our goal is to empower youth to take adaptation and mitigation actions, as also enhance their participation in climate-related policy formulation and its implementation, as the opening speaker mentioned. In the lead up to COP26, Italy, in partnership with UK, has been organizing youth dialogues, engagements, and events. In doing so, the overarching goal has been to empower members of society to engage in climate action through education, training, public awareness, participation, information dissemination, and international cooperation. This special thematic track will bring forth youth voices, and its outcome will feature in WSDS 2021 proceedings. It will also be a precursor for establishment of a youth network for an exclusive youth event that Terry will organize this summer, ahead of COP26 in Glasgow in November this year, seeking to capture the essence of youth as a sustainability-driven force. A year ago, Terry and the German GIZ organized a youth climate conclave and presented a youth declaration on climate action at WSDS 2020. Over the past year, a series of competitions have been conducted, photography, blogging, short video, so as to appreciate and project youth perceptions and concerns via different formats. We have consciously adopted a competitive, educative approach to enhance youth engagement for climate action and provided a platform to them to showcase their inspiring stories of change. In parallel with these words of welcome, I would also like to convey our gratitude to the Indian Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, Government of India, the European Union and the mission of its delegation in India, the Italian and UK governments, Ambassador De Luca and his embassy, the UK High Commission, GIZ, CEEW, and certainly Terry, while felicitating all our Youth Climate Conclave contestants, including prize winners. We look forward at Terry to working with our youth so as to give everyone an opportunity for a dignified life in a clean, safe, secure, and healthy world, and passing it on in good shape for future generations to enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your energetic and empowering words. Next, we have the announcement of winners of the photo, blog, and short video competition under the second edition of Youth Climate Conclave, which I'm sure most of the participants joined today are waiting for. As you might already be aware, as part of the second edition of the Youth Climate Conclave, that is the YCC, a series of online competitions were held under photography, blogging, and short video in age categories of 10 to 18 years, that was the A category, and 19 to 25 years, that was the B category. This conclave is envisaged as a competitive and an educative mode of action wherein youth from across the country will come together to join hands and address the issues of climate change. We received an overwhelming response from youth reflecting their interest on addressing climate change. After a rigorous selection process, 6 entries from each category were shortlisted for the final stage of selection. We are confident that it was a joyful experience for you to go through the shortlisted entries. The top 3 final selection of best entries were done through popular voting. We now present to you the winning entries from the 2 age categories for all the 3 competitions. For this, I would request the colleagues at the back end to play the video announcing the winners. I would also request the colleagues at the back end to play the 2 winning videos from Rabani and Tarun.
Hello friends, I'm Rabani Drover from Springdale School, Dholapur, and today I'm going to talk about how recycling can prevent climate change. What is climate change? Climate change refers to any significant change in the measures of climate like temperature, wind, and precipitation. A few causes of climate change are deforestation, burning of fossil fuels, and pollution by other human activities. Why should we recycle? Recycling has emerged as one of the most important weapons in the fight against global warming and climate change. Recycling helps to save energy, it reduces deforestation and minimizes greenhouse emissions from landfills, and encourages the production of more energy efficient products. Recycling is easy and requires minimal effort and time. Recycling eliminates the need for new raw materials to make new products. Recycling also reduces energy consumption. Thank you.
A big congratulations to all the participants and the winners. We wish you luck for all your future endeavors. Moving on now, I would like to welcome Mr. Christophe Manet, Charge of Affairs of the Delegation of European Union to India, to deliver a special address for this day today. Over to you, sir.
Dash, Excellencies, good afternoon. Participants, good afternoon. Many thanks for the introduction. It is a very great pleasure to be here today at this youth track at the beginning of the World Sustainable Development Summit. I would like to thank the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change for the close cooperation, as well as TERI, GIZ India and CEW. For me, the Youth Climate Conclave is a very good example of our positive EU-India cooperation. I would like to congratulate all the 36 winners of the blog, photo and short video competition under the Youth Climate Conclave competition. I'm really impressed by your beautiful entries that will contribute to creating awareness among the youth about climate change and the environment, and about possible action we can take individually or together. In particular, I would like to congratulate the numbers 1, 2, and 3 in each category who have just been announced. I am sure many more will get to know and see your inspiring contributions. I think it is an excellent choice of TERI to have a youth session at the beginning of the World Sustainable Development Summit, thereby demonstrating the importance we all should attach to the role of youth. It is youth which is ensuring that we keep climate change and biodiversity high on the agenda. It is both the youth and science which are telling us very clearly that we should do more, that we should move faster, and that we are running out of time. The EU and India have a lot in common. In today's complex world, increasingly multipolar and uncertain, the EU and India, the world's two largest democracies, need each other and have something to offer to the rest of the world. We are natural partners. Our cooperation can contribute to making the world safer, more prosperous, more sustainable. We want a green, digital, just, and resilient future for the next generations. While we are still fighting the pandemic, we cannot forget that climate change and biodiversity loss are existential threats for all of us. As the President of the European Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, phrased it, the consequences of the COVID pandemic are such that we need to make investment on an unprecedented scale. Investment directed not only at rebuilding our economies, but also to reshape and to build better. The EU believes that the policies we put in place now should set our infrastructure, agriculture, industries and investments on the right path towards greener solutions. We need a shift in paradigm. We do not believe in a trade-off between economic growth and the environment. Sustainability-driven investments are a source of growth and jobs that will last. The EU recovery package, which is called Next Generation EU, is underpinned by this new paradigm. It is our new growth strategy to overcome the challenges of climate change and environmental degradation, and to transform the European Union into a resource-efficient and competitive economy. We want to move to a climate-neutral European continent by 2050, and a clean, circular economy, restoring biodiversity and cutting pollution. The EU and India are already cooperating in the area of sustainable development. In the last years, several EU-India cooperative partnerships have been established on clean energy and climate partnership, which aims at working together on increased energy, renewable energy, and climate action. On water, we cooperate on the Clean Ganga initiative, and we are working in developing policy guidelines for safe water reuse, which is even more important in the post-COVID times. With the India-EU partnerships for smart and sustainable urbanization, we contribute to Swachh Bharat, the 100 Smart Cities mission, and AMRUT. This year will be very important for the planet. This year, we need to start recovering from the pandemic, and we need to make bold moves at COP15 on biodiversity in Kunming and COP26 on climate change to ensure that we are not too late with actions. I believe it is very telling that also the UK and Italy are participating to this youth session, representing the presidency of COP26. This year is about cooperation between countries and also cooperation between generations. We are very much looking forward to working together with the UK, Italy, and India to make COP26 a success. I believe that the Youth Climate Conclave and the youth event that will be organized by Italy will have the same objectives as today, to contribute to strengthening awareness among the youth and allow all of us to look for new and better solutions, for new technologies and new ways of consumption and production, new ways of life. To conclude and to paraphrase Mahatma Gandhi, I hope that the youth, in a gentle way, will shake the world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Now I welcome His Excellency Mr. Vincenzo De Luca, the Ambassador of Italy to India. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dash, dear colleagues and excellencies. I'm so happy to join this event. As you mentioned, Italy will co-chair with the UK government the COP26, and we will chair G20. Also, G20 will be an important process in sort of bringing position closer, increasing commitments of G20 before Glasgow. And also we would like to focus the process of preparation of Glasgow with the Youth Summit that will take place from 28 to 30 September in Milan. The same date, 30 September, will be also the first date of pre-COP. That is an important step in the preparation of Glasgow. The first 2 days of the Youth Summit will be dedicated to thematic working groups. The third day will be dedicated to discussion between young delegates and ministers participating in the pre-COP26. The themes are the result of a preparatory process that combined the result of 9 YAF 4 Climate Live Series events organized monthly by the Minister of Environment in Italy, a negotiation process within the UNFCCC, inputs that emerge from the major youth dialogue forum. The result of the event will be incorporated in the final declaration that will be presented to the pre-COP26. So we involve young generation, young representatives from all the countries in the process. The call to participate to the event has been launched in the last few days by Italy and the Special Envoy on Climate Change of United Nations. And now I will show you the website where you can submit your request of participation. This will be a very important step, I repeat, in the preparation of Glasgow. Each young person aged between 15 and 29 can apply. in.submitable.com/submit is the website where you can address your request, can apply independently to participate in the event. Participation of 400 young people in compliance with fair representation of gender, geographical balance, and social inclusion will be the format of this summit. Ideally, 2 young people will be selected from each of the 197 member countries of the UNFCCC, or at least 60 young people from each of the 5 regional groups recognized by United Nations. As I told you before, of course, also the G20 will be an important step before Glasgow. And of course, in the agenda of G20, climate change, preparation of Glasgow will be on the top of the discussion of the meetings of the ministers, and of the leaders. Italy and India has been developing a very close partnership in the framework also, as mentioned by our friend and colleague Christoph in the previous intervention. In the framework, focus is really on a green sort of partnership. Green partnership between Europe and India, green partnership between Italy and India. In fact, in the last few years, we have increased our investment here in India on renewable energy, smart grid, hydrogen, research on sustainable material, food processing for reducing waste in agriculture, energy efficiency in manufacturing. So I think this event today is more or less one of the first events of this year, together with the UK embassy here, the High Commissioner, the UK representative here. We will have also Jan after me. We will launch several events to discuss with the Indian partners, but also to raise awareness about the importance of Glasgow, the topics that will be discussed in Glasgow, also with an ambition to increase the commitments in that occasion. And youth is fundamental, because young people are the bearer of new ideas, new lifestyle, friendly relationship with the environment and the use of resources, a sustainable agriculture, a new pattern of consumption. These are the ideas, the values, the principles where we can find a large coalition of young people from all over the world, certainly in Italy, certainly in Europe, certainly in India. So we rely on you, and I do appreciate the contest you have launched and the involvement of students, young people all over India. We will do also our efforts to increase the involvement in the process of Glasgow together with our UK colleagues and the European Union here in Delhi. We will together organize several events. Thanks also to Terry and other important partners here in India. Of course, the discussion between European Union and India is also about energy transition, energy efficiency, because to achieve the targets of CO2 reduction, we need a transition, ecological transition, that was also the pillar of the recovery plan in Europe, that is called Next Generation European Union, is a plan for next generation. So also all over the world, the recovery after pandemic has to be centered on the future of the young generation and on the future of our environment. So it's very important, it's vital, your participation. And we will invite you in all the events we will organize here in India. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Next up, I would like to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Jan Thompson, who is the Acting High Commissioner of Britain in India. Over to you, ma'am. Please turn on your video, ma'am. Yeah, thank you.
video is on. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You are visible.
Great. It's great to be here to speak at this WSDS 21, this important youth session. And it's also a real pleasure to speak alongside our COP26 co-hosts, Italy, and friends from the EU, and of course, event partners, GIZ, TERI and CEW. But it's even more of an honour to be sharing this session with youth participants, because these are the voices that we really want to hear. So I will just focus on three important things. First, climate change is the biggest threat we face to the economy, society and environment. I think we all know that if we fail to act now, the next generation will have to deal with the impact and the cost, and that's just not acceptable. Second, young people are at the centre of delivering the bold action we need to reduce emissions and to build resilience. Whatever your passion, you can harness it for climate action. And if we act now, we can build an exciting low-carbon world that creates jobs and prosperity without harming the planet. Third, I want to focus attention on the UN Climate Conference, COP26, taking place in November this year. We really hope that young people can help us to make this a big moment where the world comes together to drive forward action to make it greener, safer, more secure for us all. We know that climate change is here and it's real. We can see the impact the world over, from wildfires in Australia to massive cyclones and regular droughts here in India. India, of course, is particularly exposed to climatic extremes, and the COVID pandemic, as we've just been hearing, is not making things any easier. UK and India are facing a lot of the same challenges from climate change. Things like how to use more renewable energy, how to forecast the weather better, how to plan better flood protection, and find solutions to air pollution, of course. So for some time, we've been working together to tackle these problems as a joint force for good. But despite all the challenges, we are both making progress. India is developing more renewable energy at an amazing speed, adding more electric vehicles to its fleet, mobilising the global community through initiatives like the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. And our sense is that India's story will really help to inspire other nations to take more action too. But the UK is also taking bold action, nearly halving our emissions in less than 30 years, whilst growing our economies up by 75%, which really shows that green growth is possible. We've also created the biggest offshore wind capacity in the world, and we're using less coal than we did 250 years ago. Coal is now only 2% of our energy mix. But still, we need to do more and to do it faster as part of our recovery from the COVID crisis. And I think COVID has made us all think again about the relationship we want to have with nature. We're convinced that a green recovery is essential to really embrace the cutting-edge clean technology of the future rather than the old polluting ways of the past. And back to young people across the world are really leading the way and fighting to secure a cleaner, safer, more secure future. In India and the UK, we've seen amazing mobilisation through initiatives like Fridays for the Future. More than 50 youth organisations and student groups have petitioned the Indian government on EIA environmental notifications. And youth are just generally really making their voices heard. We need to listen to that message and get behind it to drive real action. In particular, we want to channel this energy towards making the COP26 UN Climate Change Conference a success in November, and to help us secure more action to switch to clean energy and transport, protect nature and biodiversity, strengthen adaptation and resilience, and mobilise the green finance needed to pay for it all. It's great to be here with our COP26 co-host Italy, previous speaker, His Excellency, whose important pre-conference youth activities will help to channel youth voices into COP26 and to challenge all countries to commit to bold action and show evidence that they're following up. The UK will also continue to work hard to support the leaders, thinkers and innovators of tomorrow by offering Chevening scholarships for young leaders to study in the UK and supporting prizes for new innovations like the Ashton Awards on sustainable energy. So for all young people taking part in this event, I want to just conclude by saying that no matter where your passion lies and what your strengths are, there are infinite possibilities to use your skills to help build a clean and resilient future. You can be the next leaders and storytellers that inspire the world to take action. The next green engineers who build cleaner cities, or the next green finance experts who develop ways to fund a clean economy. Throughout and beyond our presidency of COP26, the UK will continue to work with India's vibrant youth and all other stakeholders to galvanise more ambitious action on climate change and accelerate towards a positive, low-carbon future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your address. I would love to now invite Ms. Taru Mehta, who is the Area Convener for Environment Education Awareness, or the EEA at TERI, to tell us more about the Youth Climate Conclave. Over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to all the dignitaries for joining us today. It was indeed a pleasure to have all of you. Since we are waiting for Dr. Mathur to join, so I thought to step in and talk to you about Youth Climate Conclave. The track was held under the second edition of Youth Climate Conclave, which is supported by the EU delegation to India and GIZ as part of Strategic Partnership for Implementation of Paris Agreement project, wherein Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India is the nodal ministry. Later this year, a capacity building initiative and the conclave will be held. We request all the youth delegates to stay tuned for important announcements at TERI's social media handles. Also to state that since we've heard the three dignitaries in the session earlier, there are a few questions that are coming in from the audience, which I would like to take it up, and if the dignitaries are still present, would you mind please taking these questions? So the first one from Kamilva Pant, she says that the messaging on climate change is quite clear, and all the events and all the policies talk about climate emergency, but the differences that has been seen in environment in near future has been instrumental during the global lockdowns. So all the dignitaries, do you think that strict actions on sustainable lifestyle changes is the need of the hour, or our direction towards fighting for climate change is correct? Can I request one of the ambassadors to take this question?
Could you repeat the question, because I didn't hear very well?
Sir, there is a question from one of the audience.
Yes.
That says that the climate emergency policies and events are in the right direction. We get the messaging, it's very clear. But the changes in the environment were only seen when there was complete global lockdown during COVID-19 pandemic. So do you think that changing lifestyle and being strict about it by the government side is crucial and the need of the hour, or are we at the right direction to solve the climate emergency crisis?
It's quite clear now. Thank you so much for this question. I mentioned in my speech that is important also in terms of culture, in terms of awareness, to look at our lifestyle all over the world. And the pandemic maybe has introduced a dramatic change in the opinion of the young people, but also of the general public opinion. The idea that we have to reduce useless style of mobility or useless style of, let's say, behavior, and also how we produce food, how is our consumption pattern in terms of food, in terms of goods. It's crucial because, of course, policy can be successful if there is also a strong public opinion support. We have to act on both sides. policy and public opinion together. And the young people, youth, is crucial because, as I said in my introduction, young people are more bearer of new ideas, new lifestyle. They tend to have a different system of consumption, and also the awareness of the use of resources, either raw material or water or natural resources. So I think we have, it's a very, very interesting question. We need both support from government, from political parties all over the world, from civil society organization, for public opinion. It's why we organized this youth summit in Italy before the pre-COP and before the COP, because the involvement of civil society is crucial all over the world, in Europe, in Africa. We will have also a focus on Africa in our youth summit, in our pre-COP. A focus on Africa, because Africa will be one of the areas that maybe will suffer more about the consequences of climate change on agriculture, on natural resources, and also in other areas of the world. So I do agree that we need this support, and this is why we organize this event. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That is indeed much required, and I am sure the youth of the country are listening to you, and they would bring down their energies to fight towards the climate actions. Another question we have from one of the audience is that the recent glacier slide, the recent avalanche in Uttarakhand is a matter of great concern. In such disasters related situations, is there a way where youth can contribute? Can I request His Excellency Thompson to answer the question, or Mr. Christophe, if you think how can the youth of the country can play an active role in a crisis situation like this? Should I repeat the question? In a climate crisis situations like the very recent one which happened in Uttarakhand, the avalanche that took place, what is the role of youth? How can they contribute in the journey to restore back?
If I may also on this question, the issue is
Sure.
The issue is how civil society, students, young people promote a further awareness about the risk of the consequences of climate change. In the case of Himalaya disaster, of course, we have seen an increase of this kind of situation in the last 15 or 20 years, I read on the Indian newspaper. So we need more awareness, more attention, and more involvement. I would also say that we should introduce in all the schools in the world discussion and study on environment and climate change. This would be very important to, let's say, raise the awareness of young people all over the world. So in our high-level school, high school, in university, but also in the primary school, we need an education to environment, education to fight against climate change, so that we have an increased awareness all over the world about this.
Thank you, sir. There's another question. How can youth engage better on discussions related to climate change? One is, of course, COP in UNFCCC, but there are other platforms like climate change and security at the UNSC. So how do you think students can be part of UNSC discussions?
I don't know if other speakers want to intervene, but I don't see them. What I think is that we not only need a UN framework, of course, an institutional framework. I would like to see also some informal kind of network of young association, organization all over the world. It's up to you, of course. It's up to young generation to decide which is the best way to involve in this debate students all over the world. But certainly UN framework is the first one, is an institutional one. You can find them a space for discussion and for also meeting together, because with this digital platform it's not so difficult to organize exchange of view and the discussion and platform for young people from all over the world. Of course, Milan will be an important, the first maybe, universal global platform for putting together, gathering young people from all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. From the audience, we are getting responses that there are state governments who have brought in machinery to involve youth in volunteering schemes, especially in the state of Assam and Odisha, where there are volunteering schemes for youth to help in such crises. Thank you to the audience for continuously asking questions and also giving links and avenues to the issues that are being discussed. I would also like to bring to your kind attention, dignitaries, that we have received an overwhelming response with regard to the Youth Climate Conclave. The contests that were run by us from August to October witnessed more than 1,000 entries from all over the country, and the judges from the partner institutes. They really had to undergo a very thorough process of shortlisting and selecting entries, and it was a mammoth exercise carried out over the span of 2 months to come down to 12 shortlisted entries in all the 3 contests. And I'm sure with the winners today, when the winners were announced, all of them are elated, because we've been getting calls from all of them to understand the results and to see when the felicitation would take place. Of course, felicitation physically would take place during the conclave, which will be held somewhere around August, September, for which the announcements will be under by GIZ and the EU delegation to India on all the social media platforms. We also would request everybody to stay in touch with us and hope that we will be able to do a very good show in the coming months. I also see that Dr. Ajay Mathur has joined, so I would like to hand over the mic to Darsh again.
Thank you so much for this interactive address. Former President of the United States, Mr. Barack Obama, once remarked, and I quote, "We are the first generation to feel the effects of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it," unquote. On that note, we now move on to the second session of this thematic track, that is engaging with youth, an in-conversation session For this, I would like to welcome Ms. Jasmine Kaur, a student from Punjab University, Chandigarh, to take over the session.
Thank you, Darsh, for the pleasant introduction. Joining me for our youth thematic track is an esteemed dignitary, Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, the Energy and Resources Institute. We welcome you, sir, to this chat session, and all of us are extremely delighted to be able to connect with you today. Dr. Mathur is Director General, TERI, which is a leading organization dealing with issues of energy, climate change, and environment. Prior to joining TERI, he was Director General of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and was responsible for spearheading initiatives such as the Star Labeling Program for appliances, the Energy Conservation Building Code, and the Perform, Achieve, and Trade Program for energy-intensive industries. He has also headed the climate change team of World Bank, was the president of Suzlon Energy Limited, and also the lead at the Green Climate Fund. He has been a key climate change negotiator and was also the Indian spokesperson at the 2015 climate negotiations at Paris. He has recently joined the global group of industrial, financial, and think tank leaders to co-chair an Energy Transitions Commission, which suggests ways for companies and countries to move towards climate-friendly energy future. So without further ado, shall I now begin with my first question, sir?
Jasmine, thank you very much for that extremely warm introduction. I'm delighted to be here. And I think the fact that this session is the first session in the Sustainable Development Summit tells you how important you are, the youth are in our future. I am all yours for whatever it is worth.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. So I would begin now. I'm informed that in 2020, UNDP, in collaboration with the Oxford University, carried out a survey in which 1.2 million people from across the world participated. The results of the survey found out that almost 2/3 of the population believes climate change is a global emergency and that it requires urgent action. Acknowledging climate change as a global emergency, do we have enough policies in place to address the issue?
Jasmine, unfortunately, we don't. And the hard part of it is that we need to change the way you and I make our consumer behaviors. We need to change the way about the mix of products and services that we get. We need to change the way in which investment decisions are made by both governments and corporates. Unfortunately, while it has started happening in some sectors, for example, energy, where renewable energy is now becoming more and more widespread, we are not seeing this happen across all sectors. And that, I think, is the kind of policy change that we must see in the next, 10 years or so.
I agree with you. We need a robust policy in place if we have to deal with something as drastic as climate change. Because the climate crisis is becoming more serious and more obvious day by day, and the possibility that we are tipping closer to literal extinction is quite frightening. Not only are we witnessing physical damage that the earth is undergoing, but also at different levels, social, economic, and even political for that matter, are being disrupted as a result. And the brunt of it is being faced by the youth of the world as they are deprived of opportunities in times to come. In such a scenario, how can investment in green businesses and jobs trigger a response that leads to the healing of a planet Earth, considering the fact that the global economy is expected to lose out some $2.4 trillion by 2030 due to extreme temperature conditions?
Jasmine, I look at the opposite side of the coin, which is that of opportunity. They are moved towards a more sustainable planet, towards one where we ultimately have net zero carbon emissions due to anthropogenic sources, also implies that we will be making more renewable energy, we will be distributing it, we will be using it. It implies a whole range of services that we will need in order to make this happen. We will be changing the way in which our vehicles, whether they're two-wheelers or buses or cars, we will be completely changing the way they are made, and they will need a very different set of skills to charge them, to maintain the charging stations. Similarly, whether it is agriculture or in industry, the next 30 years, that means your generation, is looking at a declining tail of jobs in the current jobs that we see, but an increasing mushrooming of jobs in these newer sectors. Yes, what is important is we need skills. Jasmine, I, amongst other things, am a marginal farmer in central UP, and I've put a solar pump on my farm. But when something goes wrong, I can't find a local solar technician to take care of it. I have to bring somebody from Lucknow. What is needed is we have the youth who are ready. Where will they be trained? Will they go to Lucknow for training? Will they take 3 days off? No, we need to bring the training to them in the village. These are the kinds of interventions that will ensure that these newer jobs that we are talking of take off. And the fact that we are ready for tomorrow, we can have the entrepreneurial skills. You know, in this last budget and the and after the lockdown, the economic stimulus packages that were there said we are going to provide a lot of credit for jobs in the agriculture sector, you know, loans for jobs, for investment in the agriculture sector and for investment in the SME sector. If we can bring green equity, you know, for creating any job, any enterprise, you need both a loan and you need to put in your own money, equity. We need to bring in green equity, which says this money will go in for making, for example, a cold storage in a rural area, which will work on renewable energy. Right? Now, that will create jobs. That will create economic growth, because all that food that was rotting is now preserved in the cold storage. We haven't had cold storages in rural areas because the electricity supply was not reliable. But you need trained people for it. You need green equity for it. So to me, these are the two key things. And that's where the global community needs to work together. You know, it's in everybody's interest that we create these skills, that we bring in money into green jobs. And then I believe the youth is not only ready for tomorrow, it will run with the kinds of opportunities that tomorrow, a cleaner tomorrow, a greener tomorrow presents.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you've elaborated really well how equity and green economy can do so much for healing our planet and overcoming the enormous challenge that we face right now. I have one more question related to greener opportunities. We oftentimes hear about investments in clean transport and investments in renewable energy, sustainable buildings. Though these changes are set in the right direction, they are primarily targeted to address urban setups. How can the rural landscape see a silver lining in these much talked about opportunities?
Yeah, Jasmine, that is an important question. Now, parts of the answer were what I mentioned earlier. We need to have skill creation in rural areas. It is obviously a chicken and egg situation. Do the skills development come first or do the jobs come first? Now, there is a degree of harmonization that is needed. You can't have you can't have skills created much before the jobs. You can't have jobs and no skills. So there's, but the second issue is the kinds of opportunities that occur and therefore the technologies that are needed. When I was talking to you in the last question, Jasmine, I gave the example of cold storage running on renewable energy. Now, that's one example, but I think it captures the fact that there are opportunities which lead to net economic growth. Remember, there is food which goes bad because it cannot be brought, fruits, for example. If there are bananas being produced, how do we, today those bananas have to reach my table in an urban area within the next 4 days. If there is a cold storage, well, it can take longer. So the net economic prosperity increases both of me as a consumer, because now I get bananas the year round, and of me as a farmer, because I get there's not just 3 days during which I have to sell the bananas or the value goes to zero. What is needed is the technology and the business model for that, in this particular case, the cold storage to work. You need somebody to demonstrate it. You need somebody to make sure that it is available for replication. And then things like banks need to provide the loan. I think all of these today are typically urban centered, but at least the banking sector is one which is across the country, in rural areas as well. So what we need to do is to build on the training programs that we have for block development officers in rural areas. We need to build on the training programs that we have for bankers. There is a National Institute for Rural Development which trains bankers. That's all it's for. I think it's called BIRD, the Bankers Institute of Rural Development. These are the places where we need to build this in, because if I'm a banker and I'm giving a loan, I have no idea about a cold storages that run on renewables. Somebody needs to tell me, how do I evaluate it? How do I make sure that it is not a risky investment? It doesn't become an NPA. Those are the kinds of interventions that we need if we want these newer kinds of opportunities to take off in rural areas.
Thank you, sir. That was a really insightful answer when it comes to green economy or green businesses in the rural sector, because unless we take both the urban and the rural communities together, we will not be able to ensure that the transition from an unsustainable world to a sustainable world occurs in a smooth fashion and is also just. Coming to our theme for the thematic track, I would now like to direct the discussion towards youth particularly. The landscape for youth activism on climate has changed dramatically in recent years. We saw this growing momentum through record-breaking protests in 2019. Well positioned with the strength of numbers, what is your personal belief, sir, in the power of youth to trigger positive change?
Jasmine, I have followed you for many years. You were in school, you used to push for change. You were in university, you have pushed for change. I think this captures what both the opportunities and I would say also the kinds of, not in your own experience, but the kinds of challenges. Why can't everybody get the kinds of opportunities that you have? So let me open this up. See, at the end of the day, climate change is a problem that is here today and is becoming more and more intense day by day by day. So by the time, we old people keel over and disappear, you are the people who are responsible. Now, you've heard this umpteen times. But the short point is that, generally speaking, the youth has, over the centuries, taken on what the previous generation has done and added on to it. Now, what we are asking you to do is to undo what has been done and do very different things. Let me give you a very specific example. No matter where you look in climate opportunities, one of the key differences is that overall, if you look at renewable energy, for example, the overall cost of renewable energy today, at least while the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, is cheaper than that of electricity from coal, right? But the cost that it takes to set it up, the capital cost, is higher. Obviously, the running cost is very, 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 very low. Now, we live in India, which is a capital constrained economy. And therefore, if I ask you or I ask a bank to invest, where will they invest? They've only got this much money in their pockets. And therefore, they would prefer to invest in something that can produce more kilowatt hours or units of electricity, which is fossil fuel. Because I put in this much money to get this much electricity in the case of renewables. What this implies is that we need to look at a very different set of organizing principles in our brains and a very different set of principles as far as investment in this case, but also political decision making is concerned. So this is where I think the youth has a role. You're looking at a different mindset. You're looking at a different set of political principles on which to build the future. I noticed that Ambassador De Luca is with us, and I think the Italian leadership on the youth movement provides us with the kinds of interventions that we need to ensure that you, as the youth, are able to build on, you're able to undo what we have done and build the new opportunities of tomorrow.
I mean, yes, there are so many different ways we as young people can take action on climate and protect our biodiversity. We can be innovators or entrepreneurs. We can organize projects in our communities, or we can engage directly with decision makers to influence climate. We have the ability, the agency, and the capacity to drive change and add value. All we have to take care is that our actions are meaningful with integrity intact. And if we can do that and come together, unite for a long-term common good, we would be able to ensure that the future we leave behind is better than the future we were given. Talking about future, what do you think, sir? What will climate change mean for our lives in India if we don't manage to have the right global response now? Will the same global effects local hold true for us?
Jasmine, the quick answer is yes. But I think, let me give you an example to show how this will work. It is very clear, this is what the climate models have always predicted, and now we are seeing it happen, that the number of rainy days have decreased, though the overall rainfall over India has not yet changed. What this means that we've got a lot of rain on a few days and then no rain for many days. In other words, the spikes, the volatility in water availability changes. Now, how do you address volatility? Whenever we have to look at volatility, the way we do it is by storage. Makes great sense. We have more water reservoirs. But in a densely populated country like India, how on earth do you find the space to make reservoirs? I would suggest that we need to think out of the box. Can we think of underground reservoirs? All those wells, the artesian wells that we have emptied out by harvesting the groundwater, can we refill them? I have no idea of the engineering challenges. We have not even started thinking of the regulatory challenges. But my submission is that we need to start looking at these at these innovative kinds of ideas which help us marry the global change with local benefits.
Thank you, sir. You've touched on so many incredible points. To bring this discussion to an end, I would, on a lighter note, I would like to ask you one last question. If you are granted a wish to make one change in the world, particularly related to the environment.
You don't want an answer, do you?
No, I do.
You said environment. You know, I would have liked a helicopter full of Italian biscotti every day, but Ambassador De Luca is not going to do that. So let me focus. Let me focus on environment.
Yes, sir, environment. What would you wish for, and why?
Okay, you know, what I would wish for is that each one of us asks for and gets a better environment through more responsible products, through more responsibly provided services, and a more responsible policy. Fully realizing that this may cost more, I would like that any government subsidies that occur in India or anywhere else in the world are focused on the poorest people, that they also can afford these responsibly produced products. If we can make that happen, I think we are on to a greener future.
A very insightful and thought-provoking wish, sir. That was indeed powerful. I would now like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining me for a candid discussion on such issues that demand urgency and action. I'm sure the youth in the audience has taken some important clues for sustainable development and being green while paving the way for fulfilling their aspirations. Thank you so much, sir. Over to you, Darsh.
Yes,
Thank
it
you
was
so much,
absolutely
sir.
wonderful. Ambassador De Luca, it was great to be here with you. And Darsh, I am delighted that we could hold this session as the first session of the WSDS.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you, Jasmine, for such an interesting session, which also turned a little hilarious and a little more interactive towards the end. And it really helped us a lot to understand about how youth can play a role and about how we need to change our ways and make more effort into making the world a more sustainable one and a more greener one. The earth is what we all have in common. This is a quote attributed to American novelist Wendell Berry. This 8-word quote is inspiring enough to tell us that we need to get to collective action for a better future. With that, I would now like to welcome Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, who is the CEO of Council on Energy, Environment and Water, or CEEW. Over to you, sir.
10 years ago, our average age for our staff was less than 30. 10 years later, I am 10 years older, but the average age of our staff remains less than 30. And this is not just an accident. It's a very conscious effort on our part to make sure that a premier institution working on sustainability in India and globally should demographically represent the world's population. If the bulk of the Indian population is under the age of 25, then the bulk of its solutions to its problems should also come from the people who are going to lead, manage, run, and innovate in this country. So the question of youth as being central to the issue of sustainability, fighting climate change, preserving biodiversity cannot be restricted only to one session of WSDS, even if it's the first. It has to be central to everything that we do. If we have to be genuinely democratic, if we have to be genuinely representative. That said, it's been a year since I spoke at a similar session at WSDS 2020, where we had a session on the youth. What has happened since then? Well, we all know that we've gone through a once-in-a-century pandemic. But one thing that has become pretty evident is that the tail risks are becoming the new normal. What are tail risks? They're the risks that you don't expect to happen. They have low probability. They appear at the end of the curve. But when you have a fat, long tail, even the low probability event, should it occur, can devastate your economy, your livelihoods, your ways of life, everything you took for granted. What the pandemic has done is run a social experiment of what climate change will do to us at a global scale. It has shown to us what a tail risk can look like. It has exposed the vulnerabilities that we have in our administrative systems, in our communities, but it has also brought out the best in us in terms of our innovation, in our ability to respond to crises. I'm talking to you from Uttarakhand, and you can't see it because it's covered in clouds, but right behind me is Nanda Devi, the tallest mountain that is entirely situated in India. It's one of those glaciers of the Nanda Devi that melted and resulted in the catastrophe that happened earlier this week, over the weekend. But was that a one-off event? Was that a tail risk that just happened to have happened? Or is there something that we should learn from what we are observing around us? We don't have to look at IPCC reports. We don't have to read UN reports. We don't have to have conferences. We just need to be physically present where these tragedies are unfolding. 15 years ago, we were reading about these things as students, when I was a student. Now, you as students, you as young professionals are experiencing tail risks coming true. In the state of Uttarakhand, since 1970, the frequency and intensity of extreme flood events have increased 4 times. The district of Chamoli, where the tragedy occurred, the district of Hardwar, Nainital, Pithogarh, Uttarkashi, these are districts that are most vulnerable to extreme floods. Floods and drought have started occurring simultaneously in the districts of Almora. I can see Almora in another corner from this window. In Nainital, in Pithogarh. So you have floods and you have droughts in the same place. 50,000 hectares of forest cover has been lost in the state in the last 20 years, resulting in microclimatic changes. And earlier last year, the Ministry of Earth Sciences brought out a report that says the Hindu Kush Himalayan region has already experienced a rise of 1.3 degrees Celsius during 1950 and 2014. Climate change is not an academic concept anymore. It is not the outcome of modeling projections anymore. It is here and now. We are living through it. So much for the bad news. So what do we do as youth or as former youth? And I would urge all of you to think about 3 things. First, draft a new social contract. There is nothing holding you back from not just demanding, but actioning an entirely different way in which we organize our society, our economy, and particularly our politics. I don't know how many of you have seen this musical about Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers of the United States. Well, you know, when he joined George Washington's army, he was just 22. And that's when the US declared independence. Before he was 30, he had founded one of the origins of the central bank for the United States. and became the first first secretary of the Treasury. Look at our own freedom fighters. Were they 70 before they started fighting for freedom? Or were they 15, 18, 20, 24? Look at Gandhi, look at Nehru, look at Bose. You don't have to wait for grey hair. You don't have to wait for a position. You don't have to wait for a rank to draft a new social contract, to rewrite a constitution that brings together people and planet. So what would this new social contract look like? It should rest, I believe, on two pillars. One, a razor-sharp focus on tail risks. And a focus, as Dr. Mathur was just saying in his final comments, on the most vulnerable. Because tail risks might happen and cause devastation, but they have the biggest impacts on the most vulnerable. And if you remember Gandhi's talisman, that evaluate every policy, every step that you take with regards to what impact it will have on the most vulnerable, the most needy. Responding to tail risks, making your administrative systems, your governance capacity, your technological interventions resilient enough to what climate change can do to us, would be having that razor-sharp focus on the vulnerable. But there's another element, another pillar, which is about opportunity. And that comes from squaring what is considered to be the impossible trinity of jobs, growth, and sustainability. And when you evaluate policies in India, in Asia, across the world, you often see that governments get constrained, either because of lack of imagination or because of lack of political support in supporting at most two out of these three. Let's get jobs, let's get some growth, let's get some investment, and we'll think about sustainability later. That is no longer a choice, it is an imperative. And the longer we delay, it's not just that the shocks that climate change will give to us, we will lose on economic opportunity. We will lose on new investment. When the world's largest asset manager says, we are going to evaluate every new investment based on its ESG guidelines, you have to wonder, where am I going to get investment for the next infrastructure project if it is not climate resilient? Where am I going to get new jobs if the older economy is not going to generate the jobs that we've been used to or our parents were used to? So draft this new social contract. You don't have to wait for a government signal to happen. Number two, I would urge the youth to upgrade not just ambition that governments are being asked to do, not just activism that is often associated with the youth, but upgrade your action in two particular areas, finance and technology. Again, 10 years ago, when we launched the National Solar Mission, India had less than 20 megawatts of solar. Dr. Mathur was just referring to how bankers needed to be trained about new technologies. I remember talking to dozens of bankers 10 years ago who did not understand solar. They said, we can't finance something that we don't understand. Well, that was 10 years ago. Now we have more than 90,000 megawatts of renewables. India aims to have 450,000 megawatts of renewables by 2030, 10 years from now. But is that enough? The problem is, despite this immense push towards renewables, globally and in India, the share of fossil fuels in our overall energy mix has barely budged, globally and in India. And that's just not good enough. And that's because we have now plucked the lower hanging fruit. And we've got to do the harder work. Unfortunately, now the harder work has to be done by the current youth. And what's that harder work? It's the work on green hydrogen. It's the work on decarbonizing industry. It's the work on not just fancy Tesla private vehicles, but hard to engineer, design, and deploy sustainable public transport systems. That's not just a technology solution, it's a design solution. It's a behavioral change solution. Similarly, on finance, the government has spent what it could. International commitments for finance have said what they have. But there's still $30 trillion sitting out there in pension funds, in insurance funds, saying, well, we can't see a pipeline of sustainable projects. Hence, we will not invest. So what do the youth need to do? If you were running a startup in technology for a gaming company, would you wait for a government signal, for an international negotiation, for a treaty? Or would you figure out a way to get that private equity that Dr. Mathur was referring to? Even if you were 20, even if you were 22, even if you were 19. So what is it about the youth that manages to get access to capital for technology, for gaming apps, but is not able to get capital for renewable energy, for green hydrogen, for sustainable mobility? It's the same youth and it's the same capital sources. It's simply because we are upgrading our activism, but as youth, we are not yet upgrading our action. So please upgrade your action. And finally, in order to change policy or technology or financial flows, we have to change public opinion. But public opinion will not change by us talking at them. It will change by us listening. Listening not to the vested interests. Listening not inside closed doors, but out there in the community to understand what a farmer means when they say vulnerability, when they say variability of monsoons, what a laborer means when he says, I don't have access to jobs in this space because this company got flooded by an extreme weather event. You have to shape public opinion, you have to listen to public opinion. But system change is possible. It's possible either when there is crisis, and we all see it. Our economy started reforming when we had a crisis. We pulled together a vaccine because there was a pandemic crisis. But system change is also possible when two other things come together. One, the interests of the elite and the vulnerable converge, and simple actions begin to make a difference. What was Gandhi's Salt March all about? He wasn't actually trying to set up a salt factory. It was a simple action. I will walk 500 kilometers and I'll just make my own salt. The simplest of actions of picking salt straight from the water, from the beach, and saying, this is my salt. I don't have to pay salt taxes to the British anymore. It's that simple action that actually converged the interests of the most vulnerable, the poor who needed salt with their roti, and the rich industrialists who said, well, we want industry in India. No, we don't want just imports from elsewhere. So when you think about acting on climate change, on preserving biodiversity, don't think about the specific solutions, the specific agreements, the specific negotiations. Think about what is the social contract under which we're operating. Think about how do I upgrade my own actions. Think about how do I listen to people and engineer simple actions that can transform the way society works. I want to close by referring to someone who was not young. He passed away only recently, last month, but one of the most consequential scientists dealing with the planetary environment, Paul Crutzen. Paul Crutzen was a Dutch scientist who did not even enter primary school till he was in his about 8 or 9 years old, whose parents were so poor that he said, I would rather work than go to university, which was volunteered in the 1950s in a small computing to basically punch cards, as computers you were used to at that time, to start his career. But he then started looking at atmospheric chemistry, and he was the one who demonstrated to the world the impact on the ozone layer of fluorine gases. And then he warned the world about the dangers of nuclear winter. But Paul Crutzen, also a few years after he won the Nobel Prize in 1995, coined the phrase the Anthropocene, a new geological epoch where humans are determining not just the fate of the planet, but the entirety of how the planet interacts with itself and with all the species here. I refer to him because he died just a few days ago at the age of about 86. I refer to him because his efforts began when he was a youth, under the most difficult circumstances, living through Nazi occupation of his country, not going to school, not being able to attend university, and yet being one of the most consequential persons for the planetary environment. So 30 years ago, when the UNFCCC had not been signed, when India's economy had not yet started reforming, we refer to 1990 as our baseline for reducing emissions. 30 years later will be 2050. Many of you will be in your so-called retirement age. But how consequential will you make in the next 30 years? Really depends on you taking agency of drafting that social contract, of upgrading your action, and of listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for this extremely inspiring talk. And I need to say that it has made me think a lot while you were speaking. And yeah, thank you very much again. We just learned in one of our previous sessions that youth plays a pivotal role in achieving sustainable and certainly a more eco-conscious world. I would now like to welcome Ms. Indira Basu, who is a board member of the Indian Youth Climate Network, to emphasize on why youth voice matters. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Darsh, for the introduction, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure being here amidst all of you, and I really want to thank my esteemed colleagues who are in the house, and also my former speaker, Dr. Arnab Ghosh, for giving us such wonderful insights and such an invigorating speech, in fact, on youth action and the emphasis on the way forward. It was particularly interesting that Dr. Ghosh was situated in, right now located in the area which is in the news for, tragic reasons. I want to start by saying that not only am I a part of the Indian Youth Climate Network as a board member, I'm also a journalist. So in both capacities, I've been, and many others like myself have been working on climate change and resilience. Now, the issue of climate change, climate action does not exist in a silo. And the pandemic has, as many of my colleagues here have mentioned, emphasized and revealed even more cracks in our system than ever before. When I say that climate action does not exist in a silo, I mean that one has to always consider intersectionality. One has to consider race, gender, in a country like India, caste, socioeconomic background, and its impact and its consequences when one thinks of climate action. As my colleagues have also mentioned, climate action and its impact is particularly meaningful and significant for vulnerable communities around the world, especially in developing economies like India. Just to go back to the current news of the day, which is Uttarakhand tragedy, which is continuing to unfold as many more people, are rescued, or the death toll continues to rise. It makes one wonder, and not only just the youth, but I think it's sort of been a jolt to people of all age groups across. Why is this a repeating phenomena? It's not the first time that this is happening, and unfortunately, until we change our models of growth, until we change the systems that exist, this kind of a tragedy is going to continue to unfold. I think many of us can safely say that it may not be the last time, although I pray and hope that the situation improves going forward. For many years now, in the recent years, much more than the last decade, there has been a lot of discussion on delinking economic growth and consumption and utilization of natural resources. But there is very little on-ground change, which has happened. It's been business as usual, and the larger incentive structures are not conducive to ensure conducive or judicious use of environmental resources. Environmental security, ultimately, with the emphasis on economic growth and growing of the GDP, while that has short-term economic promises, it actually undermines the long-term economic security and resources which are depleted or are used unsustainably. And this particularly becomes meaningful, as I was saying earlier, with regard to vulnerable economies, vulnerable communities, indigenous populations in areas such as Chamoli in Uttarakhand, for example, where there are lots of indigenous people who reside there. There are local communities whose knowledge and intelligence we continue to undermine by not respecting them as important stakeholders. Now, until we change our models of development, there does not seem to be any economic security for the future generations. Market-driven forces do very little to uphold environmental security, and if the present trends continue, we must brace ourselves for a very, very difficult future, I'm afraid. Now, where does the youth come into play here? I want to first dwell upon a question and also encourage my esteemed colleagues here and audience members to consider this question. This is with all respect to my elders here especially. Why is there constant emphasis only on youth action when it is the previous generations who have left a world for us that is completely unsustainable, and suddenly the burden of carrying that weight is entirely on the youth? Now, I want to go back to what Dr. Arnab Ghosh was also saying about the fact that leaders like Nehru, Gandhi, and many others, even the Dutch scientist who recently passed away, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist who started working as an activist and actually took action on ground since he was very young, despite very limited means. Sure, the youth has always played a role historically, as we've pointed out that our historical leaders were very young when they influenced change and when they brought about change. But having said so, I think the youth and our older generations must work very closely, because it's not just the youth who are going to be impacted going forward, but even the lives of the current population who are perhaps in the 40 plus, 50 plus right now, because we live in a world where accessibility to healthcare is much more than it was before, and due to circumstances which are improved in certain ways, while ironically in a way, our lifespans have increased. So imagine a person today who is in their 50s, who is likely to live till the age of 80s, but their quality of life is compromised because of the way they're living. So I don't just think that it is the youth who must take action or the youth who must drop a social contract, but I think it has to be collaborative effort. It can't just rest upon our small shoulders. We need to work together. And in fact, I want to, I don't know how many of us here would agree with this, but certainly in a personal capacity, I have noticed in my interactions with even family members, older friends, older relatives, where everyone tells me, "Oh, you're young. You guys can make change. Now our time is over. We are now, at the fag end of our lives. And what to do now? The world is difficult. Back when we were young, things were much simpler." But I ask you, the generations before us did not live sustainable lives. They did not think the way we are thinking. And yet, the signs of climate change and destruction of the planet has existed for several decades. This is not new. The situation that exists for us today is not the creation of just the last 10 years. It is many, many decades preceding us. I also want to say that I think youth participation has to be it has to be mainstreamed. It can't just exist in little boxes here and there where organization like an Indian Youth Climate Network or Fridays for Future, we just can't exist in our own little silos and bubbles where we are taking individual action. Of course, that's meaningful, but there has to be greater collaboration at national and international levels where we're working more collaboratively with governments. Our governments have to be able to provide mechanisms and spaces for us to have more involvement in everyday debate, in everyday policy making, and it just can't become a situation where if you are one youth somewhere in the world like a Greta Thunberg who has made an impactful speech or who has somehow managed to mobilize people in some corner of the world. It can't just be that that's happening. It has to be that youth at every level, at schools, at colleges, at universities, they have to be mobilized for change. We were all, I think, the generation before us did not have environmental sciences as a compulsory subject, but my generation onwards, we've had environmental studies as a compulsory subject in school. So I think that, in a sense, has been a very positive, implementation of, has been a positive tool to sort of direct the youth in the right direction. And yet, I feel that one is left with the sense that just studying environmental sciences in a classroom just doesn't cut it. As Dr. Ghosh and many others rightly pointed out, the action has to be on the ground. If there is destruction happening in a place like Chamoli, for example, one has to actually be there and witness that happening and sort of try and work with the locals there to do something more meaningful. Also, I think classroom teaching beyond a point becomes very theoretical. It becomes all about pontificating and just sort of, we're sort of stuck in a cycle of debate and discussion without actually getting to the ground and taking action. The other important point that I want to raise is that many of us, like myself, we are very privileged youth. I'm privileged enough, for example, to have access to a conference like this one. But I think it is high time that we start working with youth in remote parts of the country and the world. We must start working with young people who are in rural areas. There has to be what we call last mile delivery, right? Local communities and indigenous people, we have to stop undermining their indigenous knowledge, and we have to start building systems where we think of their livelihoods, we think of sustainable development for them. We can't just build hydropower projects in sensitive areas and think that we're inspiring change. We have to get them on board as important stakeholders and give them that position of respect and power, where they also have a say in how their ecology and how their economy can thrive. We must listen to them. And I want to thank all of you for allowing me this platform to speak to you today, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity. But I would like to emphasize again in my closing remarks that I think the youth and the older generations need to build a more robust future together. It cannot exist in a silo. The youth and older generations cannot have this disconnect where the older ones are telling us that, oh, you guys inspire change, or the youth are saying, oh, you guys messed up. It can't be the blame game. We have to respect each other, listen to each other, and work together for a better future. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Indira ma'am, for this really amazing session. I need to say that I was hearing everything very properly, and it was really amazing to hear what I have thought in the past 3 years being spoken right in front of me, and it was really amazing. This year, the 26th edition of the Conference of Parties is being held in Glasgow. At COP26, youth will be given a chance to express themselves on the topic of climate change under the Youth COP. To present an overview of the same, I would like to request the colleagues at the back end to play the video we have from Ms. Tosca Baruco, who is the Special Envoy for COP26 of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
I really wish to thank the organizers of the World Sustainable Development Summit 2021. The pandemic has enforced our common understanding of the fact that we are all part of nature and that environmental degradation caused by our activities can make us more vulnerable to future diseases. As our Prime Minister said during the CIS Summit of 12 December, we are now standing at a crossroads that will determine whether we are able to safeguard our planet, restore biodiversity and ecosystems, and ensure a sustainable future which belongs to the more than us, to the young generations. As partners in COP26, Italy's full focus will be on the role of the youth. We deem imperative to engage the young generation in our decision-making process, and I hope that you all enjoyed the videos. That is part of our preparation process to the event Youth for Climate that will be held in Milan in September 2021. This is a part of our virtual events, but the reasons why we decided to join the Youth for Climate 2021 to the pre-COP is that we want the global youth to play a key role in climate action. The pressure on the world youth has remembered us that it's their future. We cannot afford any longer to avoid taking bold decisions for our common house. So 400 young activists from all over the world will gather in Milan to have their voice heard. Following the inspiration of our youth, we must reach the goal of the Paris Agreement in a sustainable and equitable manner that ensures as much as possible that everyone benefits from the transition act. I am pleased to welcome the engagement of our Indian friends to work together and build a common path for our societies and economies, knowing that the cost of this transition can be high, they need to be managed, but the cost of inaction will be much more heavier. We all have faced reaction on the eve of major structural change. I don't know if you remember when we introduced computer in our office. Today, we couldn't live without it. So it's the same kind of technological transformation that we'll be facing with the green recovery and the transition to renewable. 2021 will be the year the Italian G20 presidency is the G7 presidency of our British friends. We are all partners in COP26, and the EU has launched the most ambitious plan ever to support an ecological transition as well. So it will be very challenging to recreate momentum for multilateral cooperation against the climate change and ensure a sustainable and green recovery from this pandemic. And our contribution to COP26 will also benefit from the G20 presidency. We aim to promote renewable energies as paramount for environmental sustainability. Smart grids, one of Italian companies' technological success, will be high on our agenda, so other G20 members can benefit from our own experience. The digitalization of electrical grid is essential, and we needed to reduce emissions and enhance inclusion and universal access to energy, because we want also to contrast energy poverty. In ensuring overall coherence with COP26 priorities, I believe that the G20 can play a key role in this respect. In fact, the 3 Ps, people, planet and prosperity, are in strong synergy with our COP26 priority. As we are witnessing during this pandemic, the urban dimension is also key. So we will develop concepts as urban reforestation, sustainable mobility, renovation of buildings, and the energetic future of our cities. Together with the circular economy, this is the key to achieving a more sustainable way of living. It is our duty to look beyond the immediate crisis and act for a sustainable, just and resilient recovery. We take action in line with the European Green Deal and with the vision embodied in the Next Generation EU to achieve climate neutrality. But we also are focusing inside the country on our youth. And I conclude my intervention just to tell you that our Ministry of Education has included in the curriculums of primary and secondary school environmental modules that could be centered on the protection of the environment, biodiversity, sustainable supply, waste management, green economy, global warming. At the moment, these themes are part of what we call the education to be a good citizen. And I really wish that starting with the youth, we can help giving the recovery a very green footprint. Thank you very much. And I really wish you a good summit.
Thank you so much. As we now proceed towards the end of this session, I would like to again welcome Ms. Taru Mehta, who is the Area Convener for Environment Education Awareness, or the EEA at TERI. Over to you, ma'am.
A very good afternoon to all the dignitaries, friends, colleagues, and students. It's an honor for all of us to have you with us today, and we hope that you will continue to stay with us during the remaining days of the summit. WSDS 2021 is special in myriad forms, for not only that the summit is being held online for the first time, but also how the focus this year is to bring the voices of youth to the forefront, which will carry forward the discussions from here to the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of Parties in Glasgow. As I mentioned earlier, this track was held under the 2nd edition of the Youth Climate Conclave, supported by the EU delegation to India and GIZ as part of Strategic Partnership for Implementation of Paris Agreement project, wherein the MOAFCC is the nodal ministry. In order to make our youth-led programs successful and to have a greater amalgamation of youth in urban, rural, and international settings, the Environment Education and Awareness Group at TERI works with National Service Scheme, Nehru Yuva Kendra Sangathan, Indian Youth Climate Network, UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, ISEC, UNU's Regional Center of Expertise, UNESCO's Global Action Program Network, Young Ecologist Talk and Interact, which we commonly called as YETI, and several other college-based organizations. We also look forward to joining hands with new partners and alliances in order to rope in best resources for the upcoming events. With this, I would also like to propose the vote of thanks. On behalf of the Environment Education Awareness at TERI, I extend a profound gratitude to Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, EU Delegation to India and GIZ for supporting activities under Youth Climate Conclave. A sincere thanks to all our knowledge and implementation partners, CEEW, IYCN, and other youth-based organizations. No words would suffice to thank our distinguished guest speakers who have enthusiastically come forward to share their views with the youth. Mr. Christophe Manet, Charge of Affairs, Delegation of the European Union to India. His Excellency Mr. Vincenzo Di Luca, Ambassador of Italy to India, Embassy of Italy. His Excellency Miss Jan Thompson, Acting High Commissioner to India, British High Commission. Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, CEO, CEEW. Miss Indra Basu, Board Member, IYCN. And Miss Tosca Baruco, Special Envoy for COP26 of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who joined through the video message. Sincere thanks to our senior mentors, Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General TERI, and Ambassador Ajay Malhotra, Distinguished Fellow and Senior Advisor TERI, for sparing time to be a part of this youth session and boost the morale of all our young drivers of change for a greener and cleaner tomorrow. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the winners of photography, blog, and short video competitions, and also to all the participants who made it really tough for the jury to arrive at a final decision. Each one of you is a winner for us, and we will stay in touch with you for further follow-up actions. Thank you, Darsh and Jasmine, for anchoring the track with us. You have provided a youth perspective to the event. It was an enriching experience to work with both of you. In the end, I would like to urge the youth to connect with the Environment Education and Awareness area at TERI and stay tuned on our Facebook page, Yuva at TERI, to hear more about TERI's environment education work. Thank you so much.